Update 4. HOA tried to ban my guests after 8 p.m., didn't know they're all federal agents. Over the next 2 days, the auditors combed through every ledger, every email record, every signed notice of violation issued over the last year. I didn't even need to be involved in the process, that was the best part. All I had to do was sit back and let the professionals do their job. From what I was hearing secondhand, it didn't take long before discrepancies started popping up. Missing expense justifications, private contractor payments that didn't line up, security hires with no licensing, and most importantly, unauthorized fines collected and routed through a private account. That last one alone was enough to trigger a financial fraud alert. Karen hadn't just weaponized the HOA rules, she'd profited from them. Meanwhile, Diego and Leah had continued gathering resident stories quietly. Sheila, the board member who had slipped me those internal documents, had now shared even more. Turns out, Karen had personally overridden several appeal requests from residents who had challenged citations. She'd done so without ever holding proper votes, and in many cases, she hadn't even informed the board. What she wrote on paper didn't match what was happening behind closed doors. She was operating like a monarch, and now the entire house of cards was collapsing in real time. On the third day of the audit, something unexpected happened. One of the auditors, a quiet woman named Janelle, knocked on my door. She said she had a few follow-up questions about the surveillance incident I had reported earlier. I showed her the footage again, along with the timestamp and the enhanced images that Diego had cleaned up using a software tool from his bureau. Janelle didn't say much, but I could tell she was concerned. She asked if I had received any further letters or threats since the audit began. I showed her the one I had gotten just the day before. It wasn't signed, but clearly printed on HOA letterhead, accusing me of collaborating with outside forces to undermine local governance. Janelle took a photo of the letter and left, expression unreadable. But I knew what that visit meant. It meant things had escalated again, just not in my direction. That night, the neighborhood email list exploded. Someone, no one knew who, leaked a copy of a preliminary audit summary. It listed dozens of violations, including gross mismanagement of funds, illegal surveillance recommendations, and attempts to unilaterally change voting procedures. It wasn't an official report, but it was more than enough. By sunrise, half the neighborhood had pulled their lawn signs endorsing Karen for re-election, and several board members submitted resignation letters. The entire foundation of her control was fracturing beneath her feet. She'd always relied on a mix of fear and confusion to keep people compliant, but now the fear was gone, and the confusion was turning into anger. I heard that Karen tried to push back by filing a complaint of her own, to the county, to the state licensing board, and even a bizarre letter to the FBI claiming she was the victim of an orchestrated intimidation operation. She claimed I was leading a harassment campaign against her and using my connections to fabricate federal interest in the HOA. Unfortunately for her, every agency she contacted already had the actual documentation. Her complaints were dismissed within hours. One agency even responded with a request for a formal statement regarding her conduct, turning her move into yet another backfire. Still, Karen didn't go down easily. The next day, she called for a community emergency safety briefing at the clubhouse. I knew better than to attend, and so did most of the neighborhood, but a few curious residents went and recorded it. The footage was like watching someone unravel in real time. Karen, pacing in front of a slideshow that was just blank white slides, warned the handful of attendees that external elements were invading their peaceful neighborhood and that she needed temporary emergency authority to issue citations without delay. She spoke in spirals, sometimes contradicting herself mid-sentence. One resident asked, "Who gave you the right to declare emergencies?" Karen snapped back, "I earned it by protecting this community for 10 years. The footage went viral locally. That night, someone posted it with the caption, "Karen tries to declare martial law in suburbia." I laughed harder than I had in weeks. What Karen didn't realize was that her paranoia was now giving federal investigators even more to work with. Her meltdown had cemented her behavior as unstable and potentially dangerous. And in case she thought that would go unnoticed, she got a personal reminder the next morning when she returned to the HOA office and found the locks changed. A temporary oversight manager had been appointed by the county pending the results of the federal review. Karen wasn't just suspended, she was removed entirely from access. She stood outside the door for 20 minutes, yelling through the glass until someone finally called the police. It was poetic in a tragic sort of way. But even as the dust started to settle, I knew it wasn't completely over. Karen still had a key to something, her access to resident records, her knowledge of people's weaknesses, and more than anything, her spite. I didn't trust that she'd disappear quietly. And I was right. That evening, as I returned from picking up groceries, I found my backyard gate hanging off its hinges. Someone had forced it open. Nothing was stolen, but the wildlife camera was gone, that same camera that had captured the first surveillance attempt. Luckily, Diego had already backed up the footage. But this confirmed what I feared, Karen wasn't done. Not yet. I filed a police report and sent the details to the audit team. The next day, I received word that Karen's name had been added to a formal investigation list for possible evidence tampering and harassment of a federal witness. She wasn't just a disgraced HOA president anymore, she was the subject of an active case. And as I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something satisfying. Karen had tried to create a neighborhood that bent to her will. Instead, she turned it into a place where her actions could no longer hide behind rules and technicalities. She wanted power, what she got was exposure. And soon, she'd get something even better, accountability.